This one will be a 4-week series. It will carry us through May. It is titled The Worlds We Create. And, all right, good. And this is one that I've been thinking about for a couple of weeks now. I am extremely excited to begin it. That's kind of how it works. You have an idea, you begin working on it. Then you have to sit for a bit. You have to wait for, opening day, whatever you want to call this. And sometimes it's actually really difficult to sit in a seat and listen to someone else's sermon, regardless of how good it is, because you're like, oh my gosh, I got something to say, which is a really good thing. And I'm really excited to begin this new series. The title of this first one is, wrong way. Oh man, where am I going? Here we go. The title of this is The Power of Attention. Now, let's do an intro to this series. What is it all about? Because you hear this, the worlds we create, and you're wondering, what in the world will we be talking about? Yes, of course, we'll be turning to Genesis 1 here in a moment. Every story should begin right in the beginning, so we'll get there in a minute. But here's the premise of this series. It's based on the idea that we each live in a world of our own making. We all live in our own reality, and that reality is vastly different than the person you are sitting next to. Even if you know the person well, they are still a complete universe themselves. And there is, just like we have black holes in space, we all have black holes inside of us. There's this hidden space that we all carry within us, and we all live in our own different reality here. Now, I understand, we're up here right now. Don't worry, I'm going to bring it down here for us, because right now you're thinking, whoa, okay, where's this going? Now, I tried to figure out what's the best way to illustrate this. I had no idea. I toyed with a couple of thoughts, a couple illustrations. None of them sat right with me. I said, I'm going to take a break from it. I'm going to set it to the side, and I'm going to go to the gym. While I was at the gym, the perfect illustration came to me. And in order to illustrate this, who is carrying with them this morning earbuds? All right, if you have your earbuds, go and put them into your ears for a moment. If they're in your car, don't worry, you don't have to go get them. It's okay. You're excused. Now, I was at the gym, and during my time at the gym, I ended up not putting my earbuds in, and I just was walking around lifting some weights. But what I noticed, I could hear the music that was going throughout the speakers in the gym. But as I was looking around, I realized pretty much everyone else in the gym had their earbuds in. We were all inhabiting the same space, but we all had a different soundtrack going on in our minds. That's typically how it works. We could all have our earbuds in, like some of you have right now, and chances are you would all be listening to something different. Some of you might be listening to a podcast. Well, what kind of a podcast? Maybe you're listening to a health podcast. Maybe you're listening to a history podcast. One of us might be listening to a spirituality podcast. But then there's the rest of us who are like, I don't like listening to podcasts. I want music. So you have your own playlist that you are listening. Some of you, you're into hip hop. Then there's others, you're into punk rock, classical music. If we were to put earbuds in and choose something to listen to, every single one of us would be listening to something different. When we think about what's swirling around inside of our heads, your thoughts are completely different than the person that you're sitting next to. We all have a different world of thoughts that's swirling, spinning, moving around, bouncing around throughout our heads. And here's the other thing. We're all in this space together, right? But yet, we're all experiencing this moment differently. Because we all have a different lens through which we are experiencing the present moment. So even though we're all sitting here listening to the same sermon, It's bringing up different things about your life, your past experiences, the conversation that you had over breakfast, what you will be doing when you leave Awaken after the service has ended. So we're all in the same space, but yet in here, things are vastly different. Here's how I look at it. We all have our own mixtape, and this is for everyone who was born probably... do you even know what a mixtape is, Keaton? Okay. When I was younger, I would listen to the radio, and I had a tape in the tape player. And whenever a certain song came on that I wanted to record so I can listen to it later, I'd have to quickly go and hit record. Right? You know what I'm talking about. Yes. Now it's so much easier because you can just go to Spotify and you can download someone else's playlist, or you can go and you can create your own playlist. When I think about what's going on within each of our heads, essentially, we have our own playlist that we're listening to. We have our earbuds on, and we're all processing life a little bit differently. So when I talk about creating worlds, this is what I mean by these different worlds, is that we're all living in a different reality. We're all living in a different world here in our heads. And we all have patterns of thinking that help us make sense of our experiences. And most of this happens under the surface. When you were younger, you were told, don't touch a hot stove, don't put your finger into an electrical socket. What would happen if you did either of these? It wouldn't be a pleasant experience. You would do it once, and then you would know to never do it again. So we learn things, we have patterns of thinking, and then we push them to our subconscious, and we don't have to think about them anymore. And that's how it works with the world that your mind is creating for you. Most of it happens under the surface. We're going to return to this in a moment. Now, for this series, for these 4 weeks, I have 4 simple, I don't know if they're simple, but I have 4 goals for us. Here are my 4 goals in this series. First, I want to help you become more aware of your patterns of thinking. Yeah, what are the ways of thinking that you carry? What's that mixtape that you have swirling around in your head? The tape is stuck on a loop. And what's that loop saying to you? What's it speaking to you? What is it forming within your mind? Here's a second goal. Become aware of how you are being shaped by external forces. Yes, we have this inner world, but every single external voice, external noise that we listen to, it is shaping us in a particular way. The things that we listen to, what we give our time and attention to, think about advertisements. They're trying to shape you in a particular way. The algorithm that you have in your social media feed, that is shaping you, that's leading you down a particular path. Most of the time, we're not aware of the forces outside of ourselves that are shaping us. Here's a third goal of the series. I want to help you listen to the Spirit that brings freedom, life, joy, and peace. We have all this other noise swirling around, swirling within our heads. Sometimes it's difficult to listen to that still, small voice. The Spirit of truth that is leading us down a path of forgiveness, of trusting grace. But because of those patterns of thinking, sometimes we can't listen to that voice because it's being crowded out by all the other voices that we're carrying around within our head. And then here's a 4th goal for this series. I want to help you become intentional about the world that you are creating in each moment. So what we'll do each week is we'll have a different practice, something very practical that we can walk out of here with, something tangible that we can touch, so that we can be extremely intentional about the type of world that we are creating with our lives. Now, let's start in the beginning of the Bible and talk about how the Bible speaks about how this world was created. Because there's something here in the very beginning that translates into the worlds that our heads, our minds are creating. Right in the beginning of the Bible, Genesis 1, verse 1, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now, the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. God saw that the light was good, and he separated the light from the darkness. In the beginning, my favorite Hebrew word, tohu vavohu. It means an empty, formless void. In the beginning, this is what the Bible says, in the beginning, before there was a world, everything was a swirling mess of chaos. There was no form. God speaks, and the formless void becomes ordered. Chaos to order. A swirling mess, boundaryless, and now there's particular boundaries. There's light, there's dark. This swirling mess was unable to support life through God creating order, boundaries, speaking, putting form to existence. This world became a sustainable world where humanity and other life forms could exist. What the Bible says about the creation of this world is that it was all chaos and then it became ordered. Which, if you think about your life, that's typically how it works, because life can feel chaotic. Here's a couple things that vie for our time and attention. Here's the chaos of life. We have appointments we have to go to. We have our work we have to show up for at a particular time. We have our social life. We want to hang out with our friends. We want to go to the Knicks game. We want to celebrate our birthdays. We want to go and do things. So we have to try to squeeze that in the midst of everything else. What about all the bills we have to pay? The chores that have to get done? That never-ending to-do list? What about our social media feeds, where we can sit on that and we can look, and there's different noises. Again, people vying for our attention. They want our eyeballs. We have family activities that we want to be involved in. There's that internal chatter. Then there's that still small voice of the Spirit. Here's the truth. Life comes at you fast. Does life ever feel like a formless void? Like tohu vavohu? Like a chaotic mess? Ever feel like life comes at you fast? Let me tell you, I'm going to explain to you. Here's the secret about why it feels as if life comes fast. Because it does. Here's our earth. Our earth, this rock that we are living on, 67, this is how fast it's traveling, 67,000 miles per hour around the sun. That's why life feels fast. Or what about Earth rotating on its axis? 1,000 miles per hour. We are literally flying through space. When it feels like life is coming at you fast, it's because it is. We're moving 67,000 miles per hour. We're spinning 1,000 miles per hour. You ever get dizzy? Because there's just so much coming at you from every single direction, and even from inside of you. Yeah, it's because we're spinning around incredibly fast. Now, your world, the world that you are creating in your head, just like what we read in Genesis 1, your world is a product of how you order the chaos and how you make sense of the chaos. And I came across this idea a couple of weeks ago. I was reading this book, and this is, I think, what spurred this entire series on. How do we do this? Because we choose what to pay attention to. The world that we're creating, it's created by the things that we choose to give our time and our attention to. Because the truth is, you cannot give attention to all of the chaos. It's too much, and it's too fast. So what you choose to focus on ends up creating your reality. And I mentioned this book. It's a book called Wrapped, subtitled Attention and the Focused Life. If you struggle with attention, if you struggle with focus, I highly recommend this book. It's an incredible book. Let me offer a quote from this book. by the author Winifred Gallagher. At any one moment, your world contains too much information. Anyone else feel this way? Information overload. I mean, that is the 21st century in a nutshell. Information everywhere. You want to figure something out, you Google it, and there's thousands of different links that you can go to figure out exactly what you're looking for. So at any one moment, your world, it contains too much information, whether objects, subjects, or both, for your brain to represent or depict clearly for you. So here's what happens. Your attentional system selects a certain chunk of what's there. Oh, I'm going to pay attention to this, which then gets valuable cerebral real estate. Real estate in your mind. And therefore, it has the chance to affect your behavior. This thin slice of life becomes part of your reality, and the rest is consigned to the shadows of oblivion. So whatever you do not pay attention to, it's banished forever because it's not up here in your brain. You're not thinking about it. You're focusing on something else. Now, by helping you focus on some things and filter out others, attention, and here's what I love, and this is where this entire series came from, right here. Attention distills the universe, the big, giant universe, into your universe. So what is she saying? Break it down for you. Cliff notes. Your world is a product of what you choose to focus your attention on. The world that you're creating, the world that you're living in, the way in which you're making sense of things, it's a product of what you choose to focus on. But here's the truth. Most of your life is lived on autopilot. Does anyone want to gander a guess about how much of life is lived in autopilot? 80%, 60%, 100%? Well, we're not quite there, I hope. Here's what researchers have guessed. 95%. Close to 100, not quite there. 95% of our lives is lived on autopilot. So 95% of our lives is a product of all those patterns of thinking that have evolved with us as we've grown, as we've lived life. So the thing that happened 20 years ago that has shaped you and that you're carrying with you, it is still affecting how you treat people. It's still affecting your relationships. The thing that happened 30 years ago, it still affects how you understand God, your understanding of yourself. It's all pushed under the surface. Only about 5% of our lives is conscious living. So that means 5% of the time we are actively choosing what to pay attention to. Now, researchers, neuroscientists, they say that we have this negativity bias, which means that we pay more attention to the negative than the positive. You probably know this to be true. You go through your day, some good things happen, some bad things happen. What do you typically think about when you lay your head down on the pillow at night? The negative. The conversation that you had. Oh, I wish I had said this differently. I wish she hadn't said that to me. Or we're stressed, we're overwhelmed, thinking about all the other things that we didn't complete in a day. Now, this goes all the way back to our ancestors because you need to be aware of what could go wrong. Otherwise, you would die. So if you live in the wilderness a couple thousand years ago, you're alive hundreds of years ago, this is a very positive thing. Unfortunately, we still carry this negativity bias within our genes. It's as if we are looking for something to go wrong all the time. We are focused on what has gone wrong or what could potentially go wrong in the future. So, how do we take back our world? Here's the question for us today. How do we take back our world? How do we remove that negativity bias? Let me offer a practice for us this morning. It comes from some ancient wisdom found in the book of Philippians from the Apostle Paul. This is Philippians 4, verse 8. Finally, this is the end of Paul's letter to the Philippians. He says, finally, after everything that I have told you, let me leave you with one last piece of advice. Brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, here's what I want you to do. Place your attention on these things. If you come across something in life that is noble, that is inspiring, that is admirable, if someone says something to you that has you jumping up to the moon, place your attention on those things. Whatever you've learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put it into practice, and the God of peace will be with you. Choose to notice and pay attention to what's true, noble, right, pure, lovely, admirable, excellent, praiseworthy, to that which is good. Now, we've done something similar before where we have kept a gratitude journal. So at the end of the night, we put all the things that we're grateful for. This is a little bit of a different spin, slight variation on that gratitude journal. Here's what I want you to do this week. I want you to carry a notebook if you're a pencil and paper person, or if you're a digital person, have one of those notes things on your phone. Whenever you come across something that is true or noble or right, pure, lovely, I want you to capture it. Write it down. And I want to see your journal fill up throughout this week. Whenever you come across something, you're like, whoa, that is so inspiring. That is beautiful. That moves me in a good way. I want you to pause for a moment, because this is how we actually rewire our thinking. We have to pause in the moment, because if something is, let's just say something is pure that you come across, and you're like, oh, I love that. But then something happens the very next moment, and we haven't focused our attention on what we just witnessed. It's gone like that. So what we need to do is, in the moment when we're experiencing something that fills us with hope, we pause with everything that we're doing, and then we capture it. We write it down somewhere, and we allow it just to sink into our mind, into that subconscious, that 95%. Then we can start rewiring all the things that are under the surface. Now, I could do an entire sermon series on each of these different qualities of life. Let me pick out two really quick. Whatever is true. I have heard people before, they'll say, I just don't know what's true anymore. When I think about faith, spirituality, it's so confusing. I don't know what to believe. I don't know how to read the Bible. I don't know what's even true about God. I've heard many people say this before. But here's the truth. You know there are certain things that are true. So focus there. You know God is the God of love. You know God is the God of forgiveness. So let's just focus on that which you know to be true. If there's something you're unsure about, just set it to the side for the time being. It's fine to think about it, to wrestle with it, of course. But let's focus our attention on that which we do know is true. You all know it is a good thing to love someone. You all know that this is what God desires. So let's focus on the things that we know absolutely to be true. Love. All right. It's one of the deepest truths of the universe. I'm going to focus my attention here. So if you're ever in a relationship with someone and there's some strife, which can happen from time to time in a relationship, you know what you focus your time on and your attention on? Not where things have gone wrong, but how you can infuse the situation with love. If you ask yourself that question, how can I bring love to this situation? Well, your heart's going to begin to open towards that person that you have some strife with. If you're focusing on where you're diverging, where there's some strife, well, of course it's going to bring you further and further apart. But if you pause in that moment and you say, okay, what do I know is true? Well, I know that if I were to bring love into this situation, well, then maybe we could find a way forward. That will begin to rewire your thinking about the situation, about the person that you're having some conflict with. Now let's look at, pay attention to whatever is right, or the Greek word, whatever is just. Think about Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. I almost played it for us this morning. In his speech, it's absolutely brilliant. He is honest with where the situation is, with the harms, the injustices, but he doesn't stay there. And he doesn't try to bring people down into the injustice. Instead, he paints a beautiful picture of what the future could look like. He's not in that negativity bias. And look, there was plenty that he could have been negative about. But he said, we're not going to sit here. We're not going to make this about everything that's been wrong. We're going to address it. We're going to be honest with it. But then together, we're going to create a different future, a future that is just. That's where he chose to place his focus and his attention. And he was inviting everyone who was listening to that talk to do the same. That is what can change our culture. That is what can change our lives. Not by just looking at what is wrong, the injustice, but rather, okay, how are we going to now move forward to fix this injustice? And here's what I believe about what Paul is saying here. I believe that this is a practice, what he's telling us to do, what he was telling his listeners to do 2,000 years ago. This is a practice that was birthed out of personal experience. Because what did Paul experience as he did this in his own life? The clue is right here at the end, that last sentence. And the God of peace will be with you. He's telling everyone, hey, if you don't remember anything else that I have said to you, let me leave you with one practice. Focus your time and attention on what's pure, just, lovely. As you do that, your inner world will change, and you will come to find the God of peace. If you focus on the negative, you will inhabit a world of anxiety, distrust, hopelessness, despair, and futility. On the other hand, if you focus on the positive, if you pause when you come across one of those qualities that Paul is describing, you will begin to inhabit a world of peace, a world that is calm, a world of hope, a world of possibility. Now, two final stories for us. Who has heard of Larry Stewart before? Larry Stewart, also known as Secret Santa, he was a highly successful businessman. He made a lot of money. One day, he was fired from his job. He was sitting in his car in a parking lot of a restaurant, feeling poorly about himself and his situation, when all of a sudden he noticed in the parking lot there was a car hop who was shivering in the cold because they did not own a coat. He paused for a moment. He thought to himself, wow, I think I have it bad. But yet here I am, I have a car, a nice warm car, I have a coat. This person out here, it's their job, and it's their job to be out in the cold, and they don't even own a coat for themselves. He got out of his car. He handed a $20 bill to this car hop. This changed his entire life. By the time that Larry Stewart died, he had given away $1.3 million to complete strangers. He would carry $100 bills, and he would just go around to people in need, handing out $100 bills. He had made a lot of money in his life, but when he died, he wasn't known for how much money he made. Rather, he was known for how much money he gave away. It all started because he shifted his focus. He was looking at his situation, that negativity bias, and then he saw something else, and it changed what he focused his attention on. He said, you know what? In reality, I don't have it all that bad. There's other people who are suffering more than me. That changed the entire trajectory of his life. The world that he was inhabiting, the world that his mind was creating for him, it began to shift. And then I have one final story for us. I figure, hey, if I am announcing a book, I should do a reading from my new book. What do you think? Should we do that? Okay, let's do one reading from Learning to Float, coming out in a month. This is the first reading ever, so you're the first audience getting to hear this. Now, a little context. A couple years ago, I mentioned I had this burnout period. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't speak. I had nothing to say, wondering if I ever would have anything else to say. And then I figured out how to get myself healthy, how to get back to a place where I could do this kind of work, and I could speak, and I could pastor, and I could live, and I could find joy. And this part of my story, it comes right after I start speaking again, right after I came back to Awaken. I had given a couple of sermons, and here's my experience about what happened after I returned to giving sermons. Once the adrenaline-fueled high of speaking that first Sunday wore off, I was still left with a bout of depression. The mysterious health issues hadn't disappeared. I had expected everything to be resolved by resting. When that didn't happen, I was disappointed. I was doing all the right things by prioritizing health, minimizing stress, learning to set better boundaries, and talking with a therapist, but I wasn't seeing the results I'd hoped for. The next few months were difficult as my mood swung like a pendulum. One minute, I'd be hopeful, trying a new health fix, juicing celery, special diets, supplements, alternative medical practices, only to have those hopes crushed when the expected result didn't materialize. While I was back to giving sermons, I wasn't experiencing life in a deeper way than before. I was so fixated on finding answers to these health challenges that I was missing the life in front of me. Finally, one night in April, I couldn't sleep. In the middle of the night, I was lying in bed thinking I'd shut everything down because I wanted to live from a place of joy. Yet it mostly felt like I wasn't making any progress in that direction. I had so much in front of me: family, friends, job, health, but I wasn't allowing myself to enjoy any of it. All my attention was focused on resolving a non-life-threatening health condition, which I was successfully learning how to manage. That night was another one of those moments forever etched in my memory. I'd reached the bottom. In that moment, my feeble prayer was that I would no longer live trying to control everything. I had been doing that with the church. Now I was doing the same with my health. I wanted to be free to pursue joy. I wanted to be wide awake to life, enjoying all the goodness present before me. I wanted my energy to go toward creating a life rather than having it consumed by a constant preoccupation with all that wasn't going how I expected. Lying there that night, I made a vow to give myself to the pursuit of joy. With each step I took toward this new life, the fog slowly started lifting. There ends the first reading of Learning to Float. Yeah, see, this has been my experience, where I have gone through seasons and I would just focus on the negative and I would just spiral downward. And I finally hit this moment in my life when I realized if I keep doing this, I'm not going to be moving in the direction where I truly want my life to go. And it's like I had this epiphany. I clearly remember this night lying there. It was like 2 a.m. I couldn't sleep. And I said, I'm not going to do this anymore. And I learned if I focus on the positive, the good, my whole world begins to look differently. And ever since I did that, I mean, look, challenges still come up. Of course they do. I still get sucked into that negativity bias. But I know that when I'm feeling a particular way, I have to pause and I have to reset myself. Because I know where that negative way of thinking is going to lead me. And it's not down a good place. So this week, here's our practice. Keep that journal. Keep your notes. Whenever there's something that is lovely or inspiring, that's good, write it, capture it. And then from time to time, just sift through it. If you're feeling yourself get dragged down, if you're feeling the chaos of life or that 67,000 mile per hour rock that we're spinning on, you feel that, you just pause, you look through your notes and say, you know what? There is goodness in my life. There is goodness in this universe. Let me focus my time here. And I promise you, as you do this, you will discover the God of peace. And your thinking, your world will begin to shift to a more calm, peaceful, centered place.